You are living in the most dangerous time in American history.
We won't take a single back step.
Former professional basketball player is now the Republican Party's choice.
Can you imagine Royce White, the U.S. Senate?
White won the endorsement on May 18th with 67% of the vote.
There's nothing that guarantees we win, but I guarantee you if we lose, we will die. Welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody, you might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this is episode 281. We're going to do a quick hour in and out. I usually don't do quick hours on Mondays, but we got a time crunch here today. And I just want to start off by saying this is real life situation. Why is it every time you want to talk about globalism, globalization, the loss of a nation of shopkeepers, small business owners, the problem with big finance, the problem with the direction our global financial market is headed in, and the corporations that are hostage, really, and have to follow in lockstep in order to survive. Call one of these big companies. Pick one. Doesn't matter which one. Call any. First of all, some companies you don't even have a customer service number for anymore. Everybody's got to use the chat, right? Everybody's got a customer service chat. And they're pretty responsive, but there's a loss of, something is lost when you're not talking to an actual person. But when you call one of these companies that you have to get somebody on the phone and you go through the automated service and then you wait for 10 minutes with that horseshit elevator music, then you have the decency to ask you, do you want to listen to horseshit elevator music while you wait? Then you finally get to somebody, and every single time, they barely speak English. And does anybody else have a problem with that? I have a problem with that. See, and then they'll say, "Oh, Royce, you're xenophobic. Oh, Royce, there's nothing wrong with a global economy, and there's nothing wrong with global citizens, and we all live on one planet." Okay. I can't live everywhere at all times, or else I really don't live anywhere at all. And that's the whole problem with global citizenship. If you're a citizen of the whole world, you don't have any rights. You don't have any rights because nobody can reasonably govern the whole world. If you don't have any governance, then you don't have any rights. Then you're not a citizen. If you're not a citizen of a country, of a nation with borders, then you don't have any rights. If you don't have any rights, you don't have any freedom. If you don't have any freedom, you're nothing more than a slave, especially if you still work. I know that's, harsh way to put it. Some people say, oh, that's extreme. Look at how well the world works. You can mosey on down to your local watering hole and still get a fresh beer and the great gourmet bar food and whatnot. But, this is the creeping normalcy of the fourth industrial revolution and the new age technocracy. This is this is AI. It's just all, it's all on its way. And the thing is, again, convenience will be the death of freedom. Okay. I know it's real easy for T-Mobile or American Express, whoever else, to hire somebody in Bangladesh to answer phones, or maybe there's a whole phone service. This was just today, I called the company and I had to wait to get somebody on the phone, got somebody on the phone. They don't speak English. Asked to speak to a supervisor, got the supervisor on the phone. They don't speak English. Finally, I asked to speak to a manager because the first two yahoos weren't helpful at all. And they're reading from some cheat sheet. There is no real customer service anymore. There's just protocol, and they just reiterate to you what you already know, and the problem isn't solved. I finally get to the third person. He doesn't speak English. I mean, how do I get all the way to the top of the chain for a company that delivers a service, delivers a product in America, and I can't even get somebody on the phone that speaks English? This is a fucking problem, man. This is a problem. We got to get, and the problem with it is, it's a problem, no doubt. I mean, it's a problem for those of us who have to deal with it. And it's not just some petty inconvenience. There is a price and a penalty that you pay societally when there's a breakdown of communication. It's crazy. You know, it's strange. All of these liberal arts majors, all of these social science majors, all of these highly credentialed, academic elites emphasize the importance of communication. You know, all of their psych theory, all of their psych pseudo theology is what I call it, because the whole Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung psychology, pop psychology now is replaced God and faith. That's what's happened. Now everybody's a fucking psychiatrist or a psychologist. They got their wonky little zodiac dream book, and they're telling you about numerology and vibes and vibrations and all this shit. Okay, and everybody's an expert. Everybody looks at their daily horoscope and they can tell what age the moon is in and what house the third sun is in, and if the wind blows this way, your farts won't stink. I don't know. These people are weird to me, but okay, I got it. These academic elite, I get it. If you're just an average person, you go to work every day, you want to be involved in something that seems a little supernatural, right? You want to feel like there's a rhyme or reason to the universe that has nothing to do with a living God. Fine, I get it. You got your zodiac and your numerology. But these academic elites, they know better. They know better. Everybody it's all psychology now. And I just don't understand how an academic permanent political class, and that's what they are. That's what and that's who the real enemy is in this country and around the world, for the working class anyway. For the layman, for your everyday American citizen, that is the enemy. People say, well, name the enemy. Who's the enemy? The enemy is the scientific managerial elite, the engineering scientific managerial elite. Now, run by big tech companies. And for all of their emphasis on communication, for all of their pop culture romance that emphasizes communication, the entire social media platform was supposed to expand the ability to connect and communicate. We certainly have let our economy fall into this abyss where communication is not important. It's in our companies, it's in our food, industry, it's in our schools in some sense. Because when you get a bunch of immigrants that flood into a community and you give them American English speaking teachers, English is already their second and third language, you're going to have problems communicating. No wonder it's hard to assimilate some of these people. No wonder it's hard for us to find any real sort of social harmony. And see, the problem with, again, like I told the Star Tribune, these academic elites, they're really dishonest because they all know the history. They know how the Roman Empire died. They know how the Roman Empire fell. They know the Roman Empire fell because of this mass migration issue. And it was partly, of the Roman Empire had to carry some blame. Part of the blame laid on the Roman Empire. They wanted to get too big. They wanted to expand too far. They wanted to rule the entire world. You can't govern the entire world. You can't effectively govern the entire world. Hell, you can barely effectively govern a city. Look at the city of Minneapolis. We can barely effectively govern Minneapolis. We can barely effectively govern Hennepin County. You know how hard it is to govern the entire planet? It can't be done. It can't be done. The bigger and bigger, a scope of governance gets from one nation or even a conglomerate of nations, you just water down the actual governance, and then you have to play fast and loose with the rule of law, which is why we see, in one hand, somebody's getting prosecuted for, a sexual assault that there was no evidence for, who's running for president of the United States, and then in the next instance, you got people who are on camera, visibly doing, violent crimes, and they're getting out on bail. Well, of course, when the scope of governance gets too big and the truth, jurisprudence and the rule of law gets fast and loose, then that's a perfect opportunity for the political weaponization of the legal system. It's all part and parcel of the same thing, but there are ramifications when you don't have any borders. That's why I said in the 2024 campaign, if you don't have borders, you don't have a country. It's not just to say the illegal immigrants are coming in here and using up all of our resources, which that is true. And that is a problem, and that should, be offensive and insulting to American citizens if you value your citizenship, if you understand the value of citizenship first and foremost, and then you value your citizenship, that should insult you. That you could just walk on into this country and get I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine? There are people in this country that go to work every day just to make ends meet, have to pay their taxes, and then all of a sudden they look up and right across the street, some illegal immigrant moves in, gets a social security number, free health care, free education, and a $5,000 to $10,000 credit card to kickstart their network to funnel money and cash back home. I mean, how does that system even? How does that even work? How does anybody believe that that would work? The only people who would believe that would work are the Elon Musks of the world. And I'm not saying Elon Musk believes in wide open borders, but even this H-1B visa thing is a scam. And this H-1B, understand, when you call T-Mobile and they route you to some third-party phone answering business that's, housed in, incorporated in Delaware. I'm just using an example. I'm not sure what T-Mobile's whole corporate setup is, but, the company is incorporated in Delaware for tax purposes or whatever else, but they're sending you to Bangladesh to some phone bank. That's H-1B visa. I mean, you understand? And then the whole farming deal. Oh, we can't farm. We don't have any. We're not going to have any farmers. We're not have anybody pick the crops. Who's going to pick the crops if we don't have the H-1B visas? Americans would pick the crops if the big agricultural companies, the big agricultural conglomerates would stop hiring people for pennies on the dollar and have to pay Americans a living wage. And they should. They should. You can't have free. See, this is the whole gaffe to the Milton Friedman theory. You can only have true free market capitalism if you have a border. If you don't have a border and everybody in the world gets to funnel into your country and undermine the integrity or let's say the ethos of the market, that's not free market capitalism. That's like that's globalism is what it is. It's globalism. It's international economic elitism. It's imperialism is what it is. It's international crony capitalism is what it is. It's not free market capitalism. To let illegal immigrants come and work in your town, and now the local bar gets to pay illegal immigrants a lower. Now, it's one thing if they're going to pay the same wage that they would have to pay American citizens. It's still illegal, still not okay, but at least it doesn't undermine the integrity of the entire workforce. It's just taking a huge shit on the working class, on the working man. It's just taking a huge shit on the working man. And you should all be offended by it. You should all be insulted. I just want to start off with that real world example, because I just had it happen to me today. Call a company, you wait, shitty elevator music. First person that answers the phone, first live person you get, doesn't speak a lick of English or broken English. They can barely speak English. Then you ask to speak to a supervisor, just hoping, you're going to get a nice, regular guy named John from Connecticut, or a Brittany, from Kansas, Missouri. Hell, I'll take a Tyreek from Philadelphia. Okay? And I end up getting Ahmed from fucking, I don't even know where he's from. And it's not an anti-Muslim thing, because I know some Muslims that speak good English. It's not a Middle Eastern or Arab thing, because I know some Middle Easterns and Arabs that speak fine English. It's not a black and white thing. It's not a religious thing. I'm just saying I'd like to be able to call and get somebody on the phone who I can understand. Is that too much to fucking ask? Is it too much to ask that the antitrust, if your company is so big that you don't fail from the customer service, if you don't fail from a lack of customer service in being able to relay basic communication to your customers, there's a problem with your economy. There's a problem with the free market theory. And Milton Friedman was great. Don't get me wrong. He's a brilliant man, and he has it right. All things fair and equal to an extent. Nothing's really fair and equal, but all things level with the least amount of corruption possible, with the least amount of corrupt political legislation possible. All things fair and equal. Yeah, free market capitalism is great, fantastic. But the problem with it is, again, there are laws of unintended consequences. And I think when it comes to the economy, we just see the top side getting richer. We see the baseline of poverty getting, lower. And we think everything's okay. But there's something lost in between. Again, I go back to reference being an athlete. When you're an athlete, you learn that the tiniest nuance, the tiniest details have significant consequences. Call it the butterfly effect, if you will. A butterfly flaps its wings in the Pacific, and there's a hurricane over in the Atlantic, or vice versa. A butterfly flaps its wings, in the Western Hemisphere, and then there's a typhoon or whatever in the Eastern Hemisphere. Whatever, you know the scenario, the analogy. The butterfly effect. Well, these things have consequences. And I'm not saying I know exactly what they are or how they work, but we know some of them. We can see some of them. A company like T-Mobile shouldn't be so big that it can't fail if it doesn't deliver basic services to its customers. That means it's too big. That means it's too big. It's a monopoly. If there's not another phone service that can come in and say, you know what, T-Mobile, we're sick of this shit. That's usually how it happens. There'll be somebody who has T-Mobile, and I'm not picking on T-Mobile because it's Verizon. It's, whatever, AT&T, probably all of them, to be honest. But if a customer can't wake up one day and go, you know what, I'm sick and fucking tired of calling my phone provider and getting people on the phone who I can't understand because English isn't their first language. I'm sick of this shit. I'm going to start my own phone company, and we're going to make sure that all of the customer care people are English speaking. If people can't reasonably do that, if there's not a pathway to reasonably compete, that means we have exceeded the anti-competitive threshold in that industry. And every industry is like that across the board. Now, your average free market economist is going to say, well, when you let the free market play out, there are going to be winners and losers, and the people who win are going to tend to win more. Okay, maybe. Maybe that's true. Maybe. In some cases, for sure. For sure. But usually, new people come along, and we see like this strange thing where The winners just seem to continue to win forever. And that's, again, this is part of the financialization of our economy. This is where you talk about the Federal Reserve and the 2009 housing collapse and all of these games that have been played with quantitative easing and fractional reserve banking and so on and so forth. Modern monetary theory, which is taught widely across economic academia at the universities from here to Beijing. This global model, the global modern monetary theory, global MMT, which essentially says, the entire exchange of goods and services for cash or money is really a scam to begin with because all the money's digital. It's all fiat currency anyway. So really, you're just you're just borrowing money until you pay the VIG or you pay back the principal for whoever's holding the note. If they got enough money to hold them over, such as the bank, then you can just keep on borrowing money forever because they don't ever have to pay they don't have to pay anything. You understand what I'm saying? They don't pay anything. They don't have to pay all of their customers, and that's why people fear in economics. The great fear in any economy are bank runs. There's a reason why. Because economies fundamentally are based on trust. Trust that you could go down to the bank and get all the money that's in your account. Now you try it. Try it. Go down and try and get $10,000, $15,000. You're going to have that banker tell you, a lot of places, banker's going to tell you, yeah, you can get your money on Friday. You can come back and get your money 3 days from now. We're going to have to order your money. That's how fractional reserve banking works. That's how banking is shaken out in this country. And I only bring the banking part up because, there are tiers of this. You got the central bank is the foundation of our entire society. We have a hyper financialized fractional reserve fiat currency society economy. And here in America, then you got the three industrial complex. You got the medical industrial complex, the military industrial complex, and the media industrial complex. And now the crown jewel is this eye in the sky, right? Big tech, the cloud, artificial intelligence. And this is the structure of our society. All industries fit within the three industrial complexes, all of them. The food industry, that's medical. The education system, that's media. Your average local police station, that's military. And all of them feed directly into the technocracy now, or they're integrated, you could say. And it's just all, and it's part of that you say, okay, all things are supposed to work together in some sense. All things are connected. True, but when the corruption is as high as we see, and we do see it, it's not a conspiracy theory. There is corruption. There is cooperation and collaboration within these institutions that run these industries to effectively bastardize your citizenship. When you have that, it undermines the theory. It undermines the rules of engagement. It undermines what people believe they're playing by. People believe they're playing a square game, or at least they have to live as though they're playing a square game. That's what we tell them the American dream is. But our policy, our legislation does not protect the integrity of the American dream. That's really the problem with our government. The problem with our government is that our legislation, our laws, our politicians, our elected officials, the Congress, the Senate, the judiciary has not played favorable, does not protect the integrity of the American dream. If it did, some of these countries would be broken up by antitrust laws. We have perfectly good antitrust laws on the books. We should be using them. Especially these companies that we know are more interested in global citizenship and global prosperity than they are American citizenship and American prosperity. Why is it that a company, just think of this, just logically. Why is it we accept, as American citizens, free market capitalists, we accept that a company should do everything in its best interest, even if it means manufacturing, developing products that are harmful to the average consumer to some degree, but they should still pursue those products, those services, those goods because they have a board of directors and stockholders. They have a board of shareholders, and the shareholders' only interest is the profitability of the company, is the increase of that share price. If we accept that every company can operate like that, why does our country not get to operate like that? Why is it considered racist or xenophobic or anti-Semitic or whatever else, misogynistic, transphobic, conspiratorial? Why is it so bad when we say America first? If you say America first, you're a Nazi. Every company that we all buy our goods and services from operate on that theory. We're going to do what's in the best interest of our share price. We're going to do what's in the best interest of our bottom line. As Americans, we accept that from our corporations. But we don't accept it from our president. We don't accept it from our state senators or our state Congress people or the House, the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate. We wouldn't accept, we're not so quick to accept, and I get it because there's supposed to be some level and degree of altruism and humanitarianism in government, in politics, because it's a very human endeavor. And I understand that. We don't want politics to become all business, although we've done well to make it like that. I mean, you're not even supposed to be able to run for United States. This is the gaffe of the entire, kind of WWE between the people and the system in politics, for sure. Is everybody in politics at the grassroots level, out there in the communities, everybody, when they're talking about politics or they have opinions about politics, it's all about emotion. It's all about principle. Everybody has their hardcore, hardline things they're going to stand on that they believe in, their beliefs. Their beliefs are central. But then they go and participate in a process with political parties that have donors who don't give a shit in most regards about your beliefs or values or your faith or on either side. I mean, look at the double cross and the triple cross that continues to happen on the Democrat side. And I go back to Bernie Sanders, even though now in retrospect, we can see Bernie Sanders for the fraud that he really was the entire time. But at least in theory, the Bernie Sanders movement was pushing back against the mainstream Democrat apparatus and all the vertical, donors, and saying, hey, we need an economic populism. The donor class of the Democrat Party has gotten out of control, and it sells one thing to the people, but we don't see the results. We don't see the benefits of the platform, of the message, of the propaganda. And that's what the Democrat Party sells, propaganda. And they just railroaded Bernie. And it seems like Bernie kind of just took his lumps and kind of bowed out. One, he's pretty old, which we get. But also, I just don't think he's really genuine about the movement that he started. That's my opinion. I don't think Bernie really believes in the economic populism. When you see a guy who takes that much money from big pharma, from the healthcare industry, what do we expect him to say when RFK Jr. is throwing down against the norm that we all have accepted for so long, that the medical industrial complex doesn't have our best interest at heart? I remember when I was advocating for mental health back in 2012 and 2013, there were so many open lawsuits and so many open, actions against big pharma. People that were questioning the antidepressants, questioning benzodiazepines, questioning some of these ADHD and ADD drugs that were on the market that they were giving to young people, and the effects, the dangerous effects. That used to be commonplace in the American political discourse. That used to be commonplace in the public square here in this country. And all of a sudden, slowly but surely, and see, law of unintended consequences. It undermines the integrity. When you take a piece of that convenience, it undermines the integrity of the entire zeitgeist. And in 10 years, we went from, Occupy Wall Street, 15 years now. In 15 years, we went from Occupy Wall Street to allowing JP and Morgan or Chase to fly to Davos and get orders on social credit, social digital scores, or what they would call critical race theory scores. And they do. And this is a real thing. This isn't a conspiracy theory. The DEI isn't just at your local school. The DEI is all the way up at the international finance level. The corporate index score. Companies are going to have a corporate index score, and based on their corporate index score of inclusion and diversity and equity will determine their access to capital, their access to cash. That's not free market capitalism. That is not free market capitalism. It's not free market capitalism when a government sets a regulation that you must pay in this currency, that this currency is the only currency that's legal. This is legal tender. And then to take orders from some think tank or some group of academic elites that have the entire global citizenry in their as their priority, and not the American citizen. Which is why the American people have paid for condoms to go to Mozambique. $50 million to send condoms to Mozambique. And God bless the people of Mozambique. And, I know there's an entire genocide taking place right now. The mainstream media is obviously quiet. Why? A lot of Christians being killed there on the continent of Africa. Care about black people. We care about colonialism. We care about the history of genocide. Oh, genocide is a buzzword they throw around all the time. Transgenders are being genocided in America. No, Nigerians are being genocided there in Africa. Nigerian Christians are facing a genocide there in Africa. Christians are facing a genocide there in Africa. Christians were facing a genocide in Armenia, and people didn't talk about it at all. Then if you want to get real about it, there was something strange happening there in eastern Ukraine before this whole war popped off between them and Russia. It's not a conspiracy. All you got to do is go back and look at the mainstream media, the vices of the world back in 2014. Look what they were saying about Ukraine back in 2014. They were saying there is a dangerous a neo-Nazi far-right element in Ukraine. There is a dangerous far-right neo-Nazi element in Ukraine, and there's something going on in the Donbass area where Russian-speaking, culturally and ethnically, ethnic Russians are facing some type of what appears to be coordinated attack from these ultra far-right Ukrainians. Now, the Ukrainians could clap back and say, hey, we just want to protect our borders the same way you Americans do. Fine. Okay. Everybody tend to their own borders then. I got you. But then don't tell us that we should let all of these South Americans and Syrians and whoever else, Chinese nationals, just waltz all into our country and set up shop. Everybody else gets to defend their borders. Everybody else gets to look out for their best interests. Every company gets to tend to its bottom line, gets to put its profit first, but the American people, the American working class, the American politicians who think America first, we're supposed to just bend the knee. And this is what they call the managed decline of the West. And this is an academic theory. The managed decline of the West. Remember, your elites talk about these things in the open. Oh, the second law of thermonuclear dynamics, the inexorable rise of China, the Chinese empire, the future has to be Chinese because look at their population size and, look at their workforce, and they benefit from totalitarian government so they can force their citizens to do things that America pushes back on. American citizens won't go for it. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it sounds like signing a deal with the devil. Anybody who thinks that the future of the global economy should be Beijing-centric doesn't believe in freedom. They don't believe in human rights. So I can't listen to transgender jihadists lecture us about Christo nationalism if you're in favor of a communist, China-centric global economy. Because in that economy, you don't have rights. In China, you don't have rights. There are no rights in China. And you sure as hell can't get up one day and fly to what used to be East Turkestan. Now it's Xinjiang. Or fly to Pakistan or India or the Kashmir or wherever else, Russia, and just waltz on into China and set up shop and live there. Not only, this shit is literally crazy. Not only am I going to get up one day and travel to a border country of China, illegally cross into China, set up shop there, and China's going to give me free health care, free medical care, a $10,000 credit card, $5,000 credit card, let me and all my other illegal immigrant homies stay in some luxurious hotel as a part of a sanctuary initiative. And then to top it all off, I'm going to go hit the streets at night and protest and say that this country sucks. Are you people fucking stupid? And I don't ask that of the illegal immigrants because, I mean, by God, they'll do whatever they're allowed to do. People will do whatever you let them do. I mean, that's just kind of the human condition. People are going to do what you let them do. I'm talking to all these people who vote with these idiots who are allowing this shit. Are you kidding me? The only way that you could get up from this country, travel on over to a border country, of China, illegally cross into China, set up shop, get free health care, free medical care, and be able to protest the Chinese government, you'd have to be working espionage for the CCP, and you probably have to sign up for some experimental medical projects or some shit. They just don't let people do shit like that. And no country does. No reasonable, self-respecting country allows this kind of shit. Except some of our compadres there in Europe. And that's fine. You know, if the royal family in Great Britain want to let every Tom, Dick, and Mohammed, ride across the Aegean there, the Mediterranean, and set up shop in Europe, that's their business. But our business is we have to get control of our business and our businesses. Our companies are out of control. Our corporations have been allowed to operate in this globalist fashion. And then all the Democrats and your average what's scary is your average working class citizen in the Democrat Party, Democrat voter, you're a blue collar worker and you're voting against your own interests. That's when you hear Republicans and conservatives say that these Democrat beta males are cucks. It's not a sexual thing. I think people get confused that there's some type of sexual innuendo to it. The term is obviously based on what it is, and there's innuendo to that, but it's not a sexual thing. It's to say that you'll let your government do anything to you, and not only will you take it, you'll take it with a smile. And if you watch you on social media, if you watch your digital footprint, you act like you like it. You like your government being run by big corporations, essentially elitist corporations that influence and lobby for policy that works against your own interests as a working class citizen. And I get why you would do that. If your plan is to opt out and end up on universal basic income, then it all makes sense. Then you start to understand the real edifice of the entire liberal worldview. The entire progressive and leftist worldview, because they don't really see themselves as working class citizens. They live as working class citizens. They complain about being working class citizens. They reap all the benefits of being working class citizens, but they see themselves moving out to the left. And that's how we got to start to talk about this political paradigm, this political spectrum in this country. There are people who are moving to the right, which is the original idea of republicanism. Never forget, black people helped start the Republican Party. Black people started the Republican Party. But the idea is that this country was supposed to be a nation of shopkeepers and agrarian farmers. This country rejected the imperialist business model. We rejected the globalist business model. We rejected the business model of the British Empire. We rejected drugs, slavery, and piracy. We rejected drugs, slavery, and piracy. We rejected the globalist business model. We rejected the British Empire's business model. We rejected imperialism. That's how this country was founded. And look what we've become. You know, this isn't a democracy. It's not a republic. It's an oligarchy. It's technocracy. It's techno-feudalism. And some of you young people, some of you, you 30 and unders, I just don't know. I mean, the only explanation is that, one, you're high. You're high as fuck. You're high on drugs, and there's rampant drug use in the country again. So you're high, and then you're getting high on the social media and the dopamine rush of the, of the socially engineered, specifically made to work like a slot machine. You know, the same game theory, the same casino theory that they use in your local casino is exactly what they're using there on social media. And I get it. The world's crazy. You want to stay, tuned in, and then there's entertainment, and then, there's food and all the hobbies and interests that people have. And for me, it's sports. I love watching sports reels on social media. More politics, but, I think there's a lot of genuine fruit that comes from sports. And there's a lot of inspiration that comes from sports and athletes, especially ones who achieve great things in their respective field. Shout out to Bud Crawford, Omaha, Nebraska. Man, defied the odds recently. Beat Canelo, who was a superstar in his own right, one of the all-time greats. So there's a lot to be gained from sports. So there's a lot to be gained from social media. There's a lot to be gained from all of it. The question is, how much of what? How much of what? And we got to ask ourselves that question now. We got to say, how much of this? How much of that? What's the right amount? Let's call the balls and strikes here. Is it a net positive? Is it a net positive that our corporations get so efficient in making products, shitty products, that deliver a level of convenience we can't help but buy? Is that a net positive for our society? Is that a net positive for the working man? See, the working man, the unions used to be organized in a way where if the unions thought that the corporation was dealing underhanded, regardless of how good the product it delivered, they'd stage a strike. The unions would strike on behalf of the integrity of the working class citizens' value. And they thought about that value. They tried to keep a finger on the pulse of the value of the working class citizen writ large. Like him or not, think he was a crook or not, this is what made Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters so big. And from when I talk to him, when I read about the stories of Jimmy Hoffa and the entire Teamster and union movement in the, in that time period, they say Jimmy Hoffa was as popular as the president of the United States. That Jimmy Hoffa was like as popular as Elvis. I mean, that's how organized the working man was around the country. That's how organized and activated and operationalized the working class was here in this country. You were going to do what the working class said. And somewhere in here, somewhere in this digital evolution, the working class has lost its political power. The working class has lost its political chops. We've kind of just phased into this quasi gig economy where everybody's, doing DoorDash or they're whatever. I don't know. I don't know what people are doing these days. Little oddball jobs here and there. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I'm not saying there's a problem, And people have always had temp jobs. That's always been the case. But more and more people are having those temp jobs that don't have benefits, that don't have health insurance, that don't have any 401k, don't have any retirement, don't make enough money to put away as savings. And I love when Steve Bannon probably articulated the best. The millennials, we're like 19th century Russian serfs. We're better fed, we're better clothed, we have more information than anybody in history, but we don't own anything. And we're not going to own anything. You're not going to own anything. That's a problem. But some millennials are so nihilistic about life. Subsequently, they're nihilistic about society. And so they end up being nihilistic about their role in society or their place in society. So they don't even give a shit. And that's where you'll start just getting high as fuck. You'll just start getting high. That's why Yuval Noah Harari, that's why Yuval Noah Harari said, in the future, when we start making people, and that's coming, we're going to start making people. Once we cross over into the realm of making people, 80% of you out there aren't going to have jobs anymore. 80% of you are going to be useless. And Hillary Clinton called it deplorable. Called you deplorable. Yuval Noah Harari said, you're going to be useless. He just came and said the quiet part out here. What the fuck is the use for you? What's going to be the use? There is going to be no working class. There's not going to be a working class anymore. There's not going to be a working class anymore when your Teslas of the world are going to build organic robots, our organic symbiotes, half robots, half flesh, kind of, I don't even know what they call it. There's a word for it. It's escaping me. Cyborgs, humanoid cyborgs and whatnot, crazy shit. They're going to put the human flesh on a robot and they're going to give it a brain, and just to make it super freaky, they'll probably even, start a donation bucket, an organ donor deal where you can donate human eyes when you die so that the robots feel more friendly to all of us in the world that are living. I mean, you know how crazy this shit's going to get. When and I'm forgetting his name, and I shouldn't forget his name. What's his name? That the guy from that helped pick Vance, Peter Thiel. I'm sorry. When Peter Thiel says transgenderism is not far enough, people want to change their gender. We want you to be able to change your entire body. We want you to be able to change your heart and your brain. Yeah, we're telling you transgenderism is the predicate for transhumanism, and people are like, what do you mean? What's transhumanism? I can't tell you how many people I run into on the campaign trail. They're like, what's transhumanism? I don't know anything about that. And it's not all doom and gloom. I don't want to make it seem like, there is no way back. But I do have concerns. I mean, I am deeply concerned. That's why I'm running for office. I'm deeply concerned about the path back. Seriously. And the reason I'm deeply concerned is not the fear I have of my adversaries, not the fear that I have of all of these people who control these industries. My fear is that the American people are too apathetic about the problem. We still want to pick and bitch and gossip about silly shit. Black community, worst of all. I mean, we spend more time in the black community gossiping about some celebrity in their sex life or their beef that they have with some other celebrity, or the gangs and the beef that's going on between gangs and who shot who and why, and whatever the case, diss tracks and diss records. We have more interest in that shit than we have in global finance, than we have in policy, foreign policy, basic tax law. We have more interest in petty, superficial bullshit than we do real politics. And then, most scary of all, we form concrete, passionate opinions about politics when we know good and well we're not paying it that close attention. Look at all the influencers that are going to these political rallies, these political activist rallies, and they're asking people about policy. Which policies? Which Donald Trump policy specifically makes him a fascist? Which Donald Trump policy specifically makes him a Nazi? Which Kamala Harris policy do you like? Which Barack Obama policy was the most effective for black people? Which Barack Obama policy helped black people the most? Name the top 3 Joe Biden policies. Nobody can answer. Actually, I'm going to start doing that. We're going to start a series here called the Minnesota Minute. It's probably going to be on my other YouTube channel, Royce White USA, where I just go around and ask people about policy so you can see, so you can actually see the average American citizen's knowledge of the government, that presides over them. So that's what my biggest concern and fear is. My biggest concern and fear isn't that you can't overcome the Peter Thiels of the world. It's not that we can't overcome, the World Economic Forums and all these other globalist institutions and groups. It's not that we can't overcome it. It's I don't know if the people really want to. And I'm starting to be somewhat contemptuous towards the waiting around part. And goes it again, rightfully so, it always boils right back down to the Christians. And I see all these Christians with all these opinions, and there's the Satanists and the communists and the atheists and the leftists and the progressives and the Democrats and the Republicans and the rhinos and the MAGA and all of this opinion. And I ask myself, man, Christians should still be the dominant political force in this country. I mean, they say 64% of people still identify as Christian, and that number's on the decline, but 65 to 70% of people still identify as Christian. Christians should still be the predominant force in this country. But they're not. They're not. They're not the predominant force. You say, how did that happen? How is that? How is that? How is, 30 million of them aren't voting, according to the numbers. According to the numbers. So when I hear Mike Lindell say he's thinking about a run for governor, and then I watch in the comments, most people who are MAGA, which is Minnesota has now gone MAGA on the Republican side. That's why I won the endorsement. That's why I won the primary against all of the Republican establishment, the old Republican guard. Minnesota's Republican Party has gone MAGA. But I'm watching in the comments, and every once in a while, you'll find somebody who says, yeah, I like Mike Lindell, but he can't win. He has no shot at winning. They've already conceded, A, that the elections are secure, B, that we have to convince the moderate, which really means Democrat, which really means liberal. Let's just be honest. When we say moderate, we really mean liberal. That we can convince the liberal suburban white woman to vote for any Republican. And some of them actually are starting to vote Republican. Obviously, some of them voted Republican or else President Trump wouldn't have won in the swing states. But by and large, the white suburban liberal woman, the liberal white suburban woman will not be voting for any Republicans. It doesn't matter who it is. And if we find a Republican that she's willing to vote for, it's probably because they're not really so Republican. That's the dynamic now. Why are we even kidding around with it? If we find a candidate that your average, typical sort of Democrat, liberal, suburban white woman is willing to vote for, it's probably because that candidate's not very Republican. They're not very conservative. They're not very American first. America first. That's the lay of the land right now. We all see it. Now, why are we even playing this game? Mike Lindell, like I said on Saturday on the Royce White Show, Mike Lindell is the exact type of story that inspires people across the spectrum. If they're genuine, if they're honest, if they're decent about their own flaws. Mike Lindell was on crack cocaine, and he overcame that addiction. He survived that addiction. Number one, he survived it. Then he overcame it, got clean, built one of the most successful retail businesses in American history, and still had the courage, after all that adversity, still had the courage to stand up and say there's something wrong with our elections. There's something wrong with these machines. The same way Amy Klobuchar and Kamala Harris said so. And now he's facing the corruption of the American justice system, the American judiciary, the courts, who are in on the scam, who are appointed by the same politicians that want to tell you in one instance that there's something wrong with the machines and then say you're persona non grata if you think so. And Mike Lindell's not our guy? Mike Lindell's not our guy. Really? Huge in the Christian community. We know that. Huge with the people who suffer from substance abuse. Is Mike Lindell not the guy who Keith Ellison filed to shut down his rehab programs? Mike Lindell had started rehab programs for people here in the state of Minnesota. And in their attempt to go after Mike Lindell and to destroy Mike Lindell, they shut down the rehab clinics, the rehab programs. He's our guy for that reason alone. He provides the best example of the contradiction from the Democrat Party here in Minnesota on that alone. That in their political weaponization of the government and of law and of the courts, they were willing to shut down services to people who were suffering from addiction and substance abuse just to bring Mike Lindell down, just to destroy Mike Lindell. That makes him our guy right there. I don't need to hear anything else. On that alone, I'm in. But I see some of these milquetoast Republicans going, well, can he really win? I mean, I don't know if he can win. I love him. I like him, but I don't know if he can win. You don't know if he can win because you don't know if enough Christians are going to come out to vote. And the whole point of the matter is, if enough Christians don't come out to vote now, we deserve to lose. What are we guarding? What are we conserving? What are we protecting? If the Islamists can run across the African continent and openly genocide Christians, whenever and wherever they want, with no reporting from the mainstream media, transgenders can take over your local school boards and your local school districts and push LGBTQ propaganda down to your 6 and 7-year-olds. The Church of Satan, the Satanic Temple, they can go and lobby to put up satanic statues on government property, bring the Satan clubs to your schools, and the Christians still don't want to vote. What are we conserving? So don't tell me President Trump's not conservative enough. Don't tell me Royce White's not conservative enough. Steve Bannon's not conservative enough. Mike Lindell can't win. All you're saying is you like the WWE of politics. You like the political theater of this whole deal. And that has been the problem with the Christian community. We have a sort of appetite and a propensity, a gravity towards the theatrical. We're more interested in the theater of church on Sundays than we are actually going out and fighting and being the salt and the light of the earth. I don't want to hear Mike Lindell can't win. The math is simple. I lost by 400,000 votes on paper, okay? All things fair, which we know they're not. I lost by 450,000 votes. 450,000. We swing 100,000 people down in the cities, which we should, because the people down in the cities should be tired of illegal immigrants coming into this country and taking over their cities, taking over their communities, being given preferential treatment in their communities. That shouldn't be a hard pitch, but the Republican Party doesn't spend any money down in the Twin Cities because, there's no way to win. This no way to win attitude is just a loser mentality. There's no way to win because you don't believe we can win. That's where it starts, as is the case in the corporate world, in the business world. Go ask any high level, very successful business person, what's the key to success? And a lot of them are going to tell you, do you believe in yourself? Do you even have the belief that you can do it? You're going to have the belief that you can do it to go through the hurdles and adversity of failure after failure after failure and still sticking with it. If you don't believe you can do it, you might as well not even try. So when I hear a Mike Lindell can't win, you're really just saying an ultra MAGA American patriot and conservative Christian can't win, then just vote for a Democrat. Find your pick of the litter. Find your favorite Democrat. Find the one you can tolerate. You got Omar Fateh, you got Jacob Fry. You got Tina Smith. Okay, now you got Angie Craig or Peggy Flanagan. You got Keith Ellison. You got Tim Waltz. Take your pick. A lot of Republicans chose Amy Klobuchar. I can't tell, as much election fraud as I think there is in Minnesota, and there is election fraud, no doubt about it. Our elections aren't secure in the nation, but certainly not here in Minnesota. As much fraud as I think there is, I'm certain there are tens of thousands, if not 100,000 Republicans that would have much rather taken the status quo of an Amy Klobuchar and her far-left policies than the rise of a black nationalist MAGA candidate. That's just the truth, guys. You want to please call me crazy? You want to hear the truth? That's the truth. The truth is the crisis of belief and the integrity and principle within ourselves and our own party. And nobody's perfect. Mike Lindell doesn't need to be perfect to be Minnesota's governor. He just needs to not have a $17 billion tax surplus and not give a single penny of it back to the people. He needs to not follow in the footsteps of a J.B. Pritzker, who is now, working with the mayor there to say, we need to defund the police. Imagine after 2020 and the crime shot up, especially in Chicago, the black-on-black murder rate in Chicago has gone from 22 to 21 per 100,000, all the way up to 33 at its high, 33 incidences of murder per 100,000 in the black community. There in Chicago, I'm sure it might even be higher. That was the national average. In Chicago, I'm sure it's higher. Versus white people who are 3, and all of a sudden, all of these politicians are talking about white supremacy, and they're going to defund the police. They actually have the audacity to tell you they're going to defund the police in Chicago. But Mike Lindell's too conservative. He can't win. Okay. Fine. It's funny to me because at the end of and this is that Jonte culture. I went to a BPOU the other day and I was talking to them about this academic theory, the law of Jonte. And essentially the law of Jonte is an old Scandinavian cultural tradition and kind of a thought process that says we don't want anybody to stand out. We don't want to deal with conflict and controversy. We don't want to have to deal with any, intellectual and political spats or disagreements. We don't really want to have to deal with differences of opinion because we have to survive the harsh winters of Scandinavia, and there may be some neighboring village or tribe or kingdom or whatever the case may be that's going to run through here and ransack this place. We don't want to have to deal with, we don't have the luxury to deal with ideas. We don't have the luxury to deal with difference of opinion and the intellectual arena, which, is the political arena. We don't have time for politics. This is the law of Jonte. This is Jonte culture. And I bring it up in Minnesota because this is what you come to know as Minnesota nice. And in Minnesota, there's a real passive-aggressive culture. That's how Minnesota, which should visibly be a red state has been blue forever. At least the presidential elections. And the Republican governors and the Republican U.S. senators that we did have were very, very uniparty. They were very moderate. That's why there's no hallmark legislation that you can point to from their tenure, from their time in office. They didn't get anything done with any teeth to it. They didn't lead a Republican, revival. They didn't lead a movement in Minnesota where the people of Minnesota were educated on why the Republican Party and the Republican platform were more beneficial and valuable to their life. They stood in the gap. They stood in the breach. They propped up, the perception of two parties. And as soon as their time was done, the pendulum swung back the other way, and we found ourselves, on a downward slide that we're living in now. But Mike Lindell's not electable. Mike Lindell can't win. Mike Lindell can win. Jesse Ventura could win. Mike Lindell can win. I can win. The MAGA movement has won around this country. The MAGA movement won in 2024. Why would the MAGA movement be able to win in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin? Why would the MAGA and the people of Minnesota? You got to ask yourselves. See, this is the sort of narcissism of your hardline Democrats and liberals, especially your leftists, your progressives. This is the narcissism. Why is it for people who are so dogmatic about Democratic majorities? For people who are so dogmatic about the voice of the majority, how can the people in Minnesota, the people in Illinois, look at Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania and think, well, shit, there's just something wrong with those people. They don't get it. There's just something wrong with them. They don't get it. I'll tell you the difference, and this is why. This is the real issue. Minnesota and Illinois both share the luxury of two very prominent Fortune 500 metropolitan areas. I'll say it again. Both Minnesota and Illinois enjoy the luxury of two very prominent Fortune 500 metropolitan areas in Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, and Chicago. Those other states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, they are still relics of the world that was built on the working class. They are relics of an America that was built on the industrial base. And some of those people still remember that time. They're still alive. When that generation goes, Lord knows what's going to happen to Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio. Lord knows what's going to happen to those states when that boomer generation that remembers the industrial base dies. And all they remember is gig economy. And all they know is transgenderism in the public schools. Lord knows what's going to happen to the swing states. And we got to get ready for that. We better prepare for that now. Because it's out there for us. The boomer generation doesn't have long to go. That's just a matter of fact. Unless Elon Musk can create a synthetic hearts and lungs for people, and you can live to be, 1,000, live to be 500, 250, 150, whatever it is, then you might get to extend the tread on the tires. But the reality is the boomer generation's coming to an end. And some people will celebrate that and say, hey, the boomers are the ones who laid the foundation and the bricks that built this house of corruption that we live in. You could say that. You could say that, but I guarantee you a lot of what we saw in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania is the result of boomers who passed down a memory of an America that used to be to their kids and to their grandkids, who are now voting for the first time at 18, 19, 20, who are saying, wait a second, there did used to be a manufacturing plant here. My grandfather worked there. If it wasn't for that manufacturing plant, there would be no me. Maybe. He met my mom at the local diner. She was waiting tables there at the local diner every day. He'd get off from the manufacturing plant and go on down to the local diner. He had the same piece of American pie and milk every day, and that's where him and my grandmother met. Without that, there'd be no me. There's still that memory. But here in Minnesota and there in Illinois, we have been completely subjugated by multinational, globalist, Fortune 500 corporatocracy. And it trickles right on down to our institutions, right on down to our universities. Not just the University of Minnesota, in the Chicago Business School, but it's all the smaller universities around it. The McAllisters and the Concordias and all these D2 and D3 and St. Kate's and St. Thomas. And I know some of those schools have some more conservative, students and communities and whatnot. But by and large, it's a wave that swept the entire academic world, the entire collegiate world. Internationalism, corporatocracy, and they believe in it. They're willing to sell out for it. This is what you wonder, was like, why is a 24-year-old who just got done going in debt $110,000 to get a college degree that they can't even use right now? Why are they shilling for the global corporate elite? Why are they shilling for the technocracy? Why are they shilling for the people who are making it impossible for them to buy a house? The answer is easy. They were indoctrinated that way. They believe in modern monetary theory. They believe in critical race theory. They believe in transhumanism. They don't think there's anything wrong with having what's the chip in the brain thing? I forgot what it's even called now. Elon Musk's chip in the brain deal. They believe in that kind of shit. But we live in America. In China, we know what they would do. In China, if the regime in charge, the CCP, thinks that there's some cultural norm creeping up, like let's say radical Islamic militancy over there in East Turkestan, they round those motherfuckers up and they throw them in re-education camps. That's how they do it in China. They say, oh, hold on, a little bit too much prayer over there in East Turkestan, a little bit too much religious garb out there in East Turkestan. Time to round them terrorists up. That's how they do it in East Turkestan. That's how they do it in China. And I saw that they just put another ban on public prayer. So that would be the Christians and the house, the Tibetans and the house Christians and whoever else. They're just a ban on prayer. It's not specific to Islam. They're just the most afraid of Islam because Islam has shown they're willing to die for what they believe in. They're willing to die for it. Like that or don't like that, it's a reality. Whether they're our friend or our foe, it's a reality that we have to deal with as Americans and as Christians. They're willing to die for what they believe there in Dearborn, Michigan. They're willing to die for what you see there in New York City. And some of them are willing to die for what they believe in right here in the belly of the beast in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we don't have to agree, but we better acknowledge it and we better respect it. You show your enemies the respect that they deserve, or else you lose. And that's why we've been losing. We're real high up on our opinions. Real high on our opinions. Real low on the application. Real low on the productivity. A lot of activity, not a lot of productivity. So I don't want to hear this Mike Lindell can't win shit. And I know it's not the majority. The majority of people are saying, absolutely, we needed America First patriot like Mike Lindell. He'd be far better than Tim Walz. He's a great, great man. We'd be happy to have him, myself included. It'd be an honor. I was honored to share the ticket in 2024. And that's probably I didn't win, quote unquote. I mean, all things fair and equal. We know the elections aren't secure. But even in losing, even in defeat, whether it's the roar of scrutiny or the silence of a bullet, in death and in defeat, there can be glory. In defeat and in death, there can be glory. And it was an honor to share the ticket, the Republican Party ticket, with President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. It was an honor. to be on the ticket in this American first victory across the country. And we came up short here in Minnesota, but we know there's problems in Minnesota, problems that we need to fix. And we're trying to fix them. But who are you as a Republican voter to say we should give up now? Just go back to the middle. There is no middle left. Understand, when you see Bill Maher going on his nightly show and conceding that the Democrats have completely lost their fucking shit, that means there's no middle left. There's no middle to go back to. Now, what the Bill Mahers of the world can't say is the center right of the American political spectrum no longer exists either. All your center right people are really with the Democrats. There's no middle to go back to. There's no moderate to go back to. We are an all-out knife fight. This is an all-out gun fight, literally. Literally, you got leftists rolling up and assassinating people, shooting people. And later on in the week and over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to try and get Chris Martinson on the show because I want to talk about this Charlie Kirk assassination. This Charlie Kirk assassination and the investigation and the details that are and aren't coming out starting to glow. I'm just going to say it. Starting to glow a little bit. Like the great Steve Bannon said, we can't have another grassy knoll here. We got to get to the bottom of what's happening, and we got to do it quick. So, and I watched Chris Martinson's entire explanation, his entire analysis of the shooting, and he makes a compelling case. Do I think it's 100% accurate? There's a high level of confidence, medium level of confidence. He makes a very compelling case. Compelling enough to where now I want to see all the information. It's funny how, it's strange how Charlie Kirk was assassinated. The whole world mourned. And there's this rise of Christian enthusiasm and participation, which we needed maybe more than ever. Strange, God works in mysterious ways. But all of a sudden, it's like we're going to move on now. It's just like, it reminds me of when they tried to assassinate President Trump. And it was just like, oh, we're just going to move on from that. You know, at least the guy got sentenced to, got found guilty, whatever the guy's name was, the guy who they caught, who was going to try and assassinate the president. But we just kind of move on from these things. We're not moving on. If Charlie Kirk was a hero to you, if Charlie Kirk was a person that you admire, if Charlie Kirk was somebody you respected, then Mike Lindell's the obvious choice. If a man who goes out there and faced adversity and wore his faith on his sleeve and took political stances that were controversial and in some cases detrimental to his own pocket, like Charlie Kirk did, and we're finding out now, a lot of people confirming these stories that he was offered money to have a certain position on a certain topic. Let's just say it, Israel. He was offered money to take to have a certain position on that topic, and he said no, per the reports. We don't know for sure. I wasn't in the room, so I can't say for sure. But there's a lot of corroborating stories that say, he was kind of sat down and asked to take a certain position on Israel, asked to visit Israel, and he said no. And if that's the case, if Charlie Kirk is somebody we're going to hold up as a symbol, as a hero, which we should, then Mike Lindell's obviously the choice on principle. On principle. Let's call it the Charlie Kirk principle. Who are the people who are going to stand up, wear their faith on their sleeve, no matter their flaws, because we all have them, but wear their faith on their sleeve, say the things politically that are controversial and in some cases detrimental to themselves financially and even in some cases physically. Who are those people? Those are the people that we're doubling down on, not any of these milquetoast moderates. Because if we win with them, we don't really win. That's the problem with the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives now. We got too many Republicans in there that weren't really Republicans. And we say, yeah, rhinos. You can call them. You don't like the word rhinos. I don't care what you call them. What I'm saying is they're wishy-washy on the principle. We have to hold the principle and move people towards the principle. Everybody understand? Is there anything wrong with that? Move people towards the principle. It can be done. especially when the principle is as rooted in logic and reason and common sense as we are right now in the MAGA movement. If you don't have a country, you don't have a if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. If you're a gazillion dollars in debt, you don't really have a country. If you fight wars everywhere around the world except the battles that need to be fought right here in your own country, you don't really have a country. If you send your kid to the public school, they're in elementary, they shouldn't have to be exposed to drag queens during story hour. If you're doing shit like that, you don't really have a country. If you're going to let Big Pharma poison the people for profit, you don't really have a country. If you're going to let young men be assassinated just for having political discourse, you have a country, but you don't have a good one. You don't have a country. You don't have a country called America. You don't have a country based on freedom and based on a difference of opinion or a difference of ideas. And we're losing our ass right now. We're losing our country. And the entire Christian world, we're losing the Christian world. And hopefully the response is exactly what we're seeing. Hopefully the response is like, hey, whoa, there is an attack on Christianity. We got to do something about this shit. We gotta get in the game. If that happens, the Mike Lindells can win easy. I told you, ChatGPT estimated there's 1.4 million Christian and conservatives with some crossover that didn't even vote, voting age, that didn't even vote in 2024. 1.4 million. 1.4 million. If I got a third of those, I win against Amy Klobuchar. Plus the Republicans that voted for Amy Klobuchar anyway, because in some strange, world, they've convinced themselves that it's better to have a far left Democrat than a brash, troubled conspiracy theorist that, supports President Trump. But by the numbers, there were 200,000 people that voted for President Trump and then voted for Amy Klobuchar, which just fucking mind-blowing. It's almost unbelievable. If you weren't involved in politics and spent enough time with these Republicans in Minnesota to realize that law of Jonte is very real. That Scandinavian, passive-aggressive, Minnesota nice, go along to get along with business as usual, even if it's to my own detriment, is a very real thing here in the state of Minnesota. And it's very prominent amongst middle white Americans here in Minnesota. Don't mean to make it about race, but it's true. It's true. There's a big problem there. It's the only way you can explain how Minnesota has been lost to the communists in the first place. Blacks, Somalis, Hispanics, they make up collectively with the Asians as well, the Koreans, the Vietnamese, the Hmong. All together, they make up about 1.5 million people in Minnesota. All together, all the minorities together make up about 1.2, 1.3 million people in the state of Minnesota. All in. That's all ages. 7 million people voted in the election in 2024. 7 million. You're talking about roughly 14% of the population is minority here in Minnesota. So for all of the racial superiority, the racial supremacists out there, as a candidate, I have to look at the state of Minnesota and the current state of Minnesota, the current state of the Twin Cities, the belly of the beast, and go, what the fuck is wrong with white America? And I don't mean to do that, to piggyback off what the mainstream media is already doing, because they're not saying that. They're saying what's wrong with white Republicans. They're saying what's wrong with Donald Trump supporters. That's something totally different. They're saying what's wrong with white Christian men. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if we're going to talk race, I have to look at white liberals, and I have to look at a state like Minnesota and go, why are Republicans voting for Amy Klobuchar? What the fuck is wrong with us? And I count myself as us because I am 15% Norwegian. So I understand the whole Scandinavian mindset. Long, long way from our forebears who were warriors, who were the Ragnars of the Scandinavian world, the Vikings, the Great Danes of Scandinavia, the Finns, the Swedes, a long way from that Scandinavian warrior culture. We've been watered down here in Minnesota, and it's got to change. And if you're not willing to change it, look, like I tell people at every single place I go speak, it's not going to hurt my feelings any. That's the thing that politicians get wrong. Politicians are usually so narcissistic and so about self, and this whole endeavor, their entire political career is an attempt for them to elevate themselves personally, that they can't handle losing. It's deeply wounding to them personally, on a personal level, to lose. But if you're telling the truth and you have the right position on the issues, the referendum's on the people. It's not on me. It's like I tell black people, you want to keep listening to, I don't know, whatever the young rappers' names are. I don't know their names that well. If you want to, keep listening to the drill rap and shooting each other and popping Percocets and getting thrown in jail, okay, doesn't hurt my feelings. I mean, I'm hurt about it. I shouldn't say it doesn't hurt my feelings, but it's not personal for me, because it's not my choice to make. It's the same thing in politics. If America had not elected President Trump in 2024 recently, if America had not answered the referendum on the Democrat Party and the MAGA movement and said President Trump is closer to normal than the Democrats, should President Trump have felt bad about that personally? Should he feel like he's lesser of a man because the American public chose against their own interests? No, not at all. And I wouldn't, if he'd have lost, I wouldn't have looked at him any differently. I'd have been like, damn, this country's fucked up. We really elected Kamala Harris. Fuck. That's not good. Now, we would have had to prepare for what that meant, but, you know what I mean. Why would he feel bad about this? It's the same. I'd say the same thing. Tell people the same way. Hey, if you want to choose, your average milquetoast moderate Republican that's got the whole persona going, the persona that says that I'm not going to do a single thing to change the status quo, be my guest. Be my guest. But I'm happy to see Mike Lindell get in the race. I'm happy to see that Christians are starting to wake up and stand up. Hopefully, we see it all the way through to the finish line this time in 2026. And now we really do have the circumstance for a red wave, even more than 2024. I think with the shooting here at Annunciation, with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the killing of the young woman there in Charlotte, North Carolina, the genocide of the Christian Nigerians in Africa, the genocide of Christians across Africa, and this sort of open attack or revolt that we see from the globalist corporate elite on Christianity and on Christ, I actually think that 2026 has a chance to be a bigger red wave than 24 was. But that'll be up to us. That'll be up to if American citizens have just as much interest and understanding and urgency of participation in a midterm than we do in the presidential year. Typically, that hasn't been the case. Typically, voting turnout is lower in the midterms than it is in the presidential race. A real sign of where America is when it comes to our political chops will be if we answer the call to show up as much and even more in the midterms than we did in the presidential. Because President Trump's going to need us. This country's going to need us. 2026 is going to be of great, great consequence. I can't even explain how consequential 2026 is. That's why I decided to run again right away. I knew. Especially after President Trump won. Oh, President Trump won? Oh, now it's really on. And it is. It is on. It's been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio, powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement. Help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement. That's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. This has been another great episode. I'm happy to have you all as listeners and viewers. I appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. On Wednesday, we're going to do our weekly reaction episode. There's so much content and things that I got to go over. I wouldn't be surprised if the Wednesday episode was 2 hours long. And we try to stay right at about 2 hours because StreamYard only lets you go up to 2 hours in length. So in order to stream across multiple platforms like X and Facebook and whatnot, we have to keep it under 2 hours. So, but Wednesday is going to be a long episode because we got a lot of things to go over. There's so much stuff to go over. It's almost scary. And then on Friday, hopefully we'll have the great Professor Penn back in for another Hebrews episode. I believe, again, guests that are on deck to come on the show are Mike Davis, who is, kind of the legal wizard of this Trump administration and has all the real legal bona fides and is laying the teeth down for this Trump administration when it comes to the fights with the courts and the Supreme Court and everything else. So Mike Davis, we have a call in to get on the show. Chris Martinson, we have a call in to get on the show. Dame Dash, we have a call in to get on the show. Alex Jones, the great Steve Bannon, Maureen Bannon, we're going to have her on the show as well. So one of these weeks coming up, you may see a sequence of episodes that are not on schedule, that are off schedule and in rapid succession. Because when we get guests on the show, we like to air those episodes the same day so that they don't lose any of their contextual relevance. Because things are happening so fast in our country. So, again, we got to get serious. It is great to see Mike Lindell say that he's considering a run for governor here in Minnesota. I'd be honored to share the ticket with him. Outside of Mike Lindell, look, Phil Parrish has been in. I like Phil. I like Brad Kohler. Brad Kohler trained at the academy with my coach Greg Nelson for many, many years. So I like Brad. I like Scott Jensen. I've had Scott Jensen on the podcast. I like him. I think he's a nice man. I'll call Scott Jensen for medical advice because I trust his medical opinion. He had courage from a medical standpoint. He had courage to stand up at a time where it was very detrimental to his own bottom line, financially, politically, socially, and otherwise. So you got to admire a man who does that. Kendall Qualls, you people know how I feel about Kendall Qualls. He's a sellout. And, he's not a sellout because he's a black Republican. He's a sellout because he's an establishment Republican. And all you got to do is follow the money, look at the connections, look who's backing them, and you'll find that, the yellow brick road of Minnesota establishment, old guard establishment Republicans. And, when push comes, I'll tell the story about me and Kendall Qualls' conversation one of these days here on the podcast. But Kendall Qualls is a hard no. Anybody who thinks so, that's how I know people don't actually understand what's going on in Minnesota politics, because there are a lot of people who even support me who are all in for Kendall Qualls. It's like, trust me, if there was another black conservative, and it's not about the race thing, it's about the change of the narrative. If there was another black conservative in the Minnesota Republican Party that had declared for governor, that I thought was ultra MAGA, that I thought was even remotely MAGA, I'd be all in. I'd be like, yeah, let's do that. Let's run that ticket. For sure. No, that's great. But that's not the case. And I'm not going to lie to people and say it is the case. That would be racist. That would be disingenuous if I was willing to sign on to the Kendall Qualls train just based on the fact that he's another black Republican. Not doing that shit. We're not doing that. No, Kendall Qualls is supported by the same establishment Republicans like Tim Pawlenty and Rudy Boschwitz and Michelle Benson and Paul Gazelka and the list goes on and on and on. Norm Coleman, right? They're all on the Kendall Qualls train. And we know who they are. We know what they did. They actually endorsed my primary opponent even after I won the endorsement from the Republican Party. They said, These Minnesota Republicans don't know what they're doing. Joe Frazier's our guy. We don't like that. We don't like that. We got to deal with President Trump because it's President Trump. But we don't have to deal with Royce White. He doesn't have a billion-dollar political machine behind him. We don't have to deal with him. We'll deal with President Trump because we have to. We'll bend the knee there. We'll kiss the ring. But nothing says we got to bend the knee or kiss the ring to Royce. Well, who the fuck is he? Fuck this kid, right? And that's what they said. And none of them endorsed me in the general election against Amy Klobuchar. Not one of the people I mentioned. So seriously, go down the list. Not one of the people I've mentioned endorsed me against a radical left Democrat like Amy Klobuchar. Maybe it's because they don't think that she's that radical. Maybe they just think the Democrat platform is better for the state of Minnesota if the alternative is Royce White and the MAGA movement. But you can go right down the list. Rudy Boschwitz didn't endorse me. Norm Coleman didn't endorse me. Tim Pawlenty didn't endorse me. Michelle Benson, Paul Gazelka, Kendall Qualls. None of them endorsed me against Amy Klobuchar. What does that tell you about who they are? But in the same breath, neither did Scott Jensen. And although Scott and I are friendly, he and I are going to have a conversation about that because I think it's cowardly. I really do. It's not about me personally. Again, it's supposed to be unity, the Republican Party, the Republicans versus the Democrats, or the America First and conservative Republican Party versus the radical left Democrats here in the belly of the beast. And, what was the outcome? And it says something. And if you watch the podcast, you know what it says, because nothing I'm saying is unreasonable. They'll say that I'm unelectable because I'm too extreme, or, I used the word fuck too often on the podcast. It's like, fuck you, transgender story hour. What the fuck am I supposed to say? How the fuck did this happen? Right? I mean, there's not really something else you could say, but anyway, maybe we get Mike Lindell on the podcast as well as a guest. And if you're watching the Professor Penn podcast, man, he's had everybody in. I mean, he's really equal opportunity with opening up the podcast and giving people, a forum to tell you who they are. And Phil Parrish has been in on the podcast, and Brad Kohler's been in on the podcast, and Walter Hudson, I believe, was just in on the podcast. Walter Hudson's another name that they've thrown around to potentially run for governor. And, me and Walter have had some good conversations. Walter's come out to see me speak a number of times. Me and Walter have had some good conversations. We'll see where Walter lands on things. Nobody's in a fixed position. I don't even think Tom Emmer's in a fixed position. I'd be very skeptical that Tom Emmer has an actual conversion to a real genuine MAGA and America First mentality, like at his core. I'd be very skeptical. And the same is true of the other 4 Republican Congress members. I don't believe that they really, really support the MAGA movement and the MAGA agenda at their core. But nobody's in a fixed position. That's why I say the sign and mark of true leadership right now is we're holding the line here, and everybody else can come join us over here. We're not going back to the left to unify with anybody, not even other Republicans. We're not going back to the left to unify with anybody, not even other Republicans. All of you can come meet us right here at the corner of Sanity Street and Citizen Boulevard. God bless you. Godspeed. We'll see you guys later this week. Everything's up on the bar. We're all in. We get to decide. Do you want to live on your knees, or do you want to die on your feet fighting? That's the decision you get to make now.